Good morning, family. So today I am going to show you a couple quick projects on how to use soft slabs to create some various different curved shapes. Specifically, the projects I will be demonstrating qualify as darted slab cylinder projects. However, the techniques I'm going to show you can use in a number of different ways. The big thing to get from this is that we have a soft, freshly rolled out slab, and we're going to modify it in a few ways to get ourselves some really interesting shapes going forward. So just to get us started real quick, I'm going to show a very basic darted slab cylinder, and like in practicality, what am I going to make a very quick cup. So I've got a nice long slab rolled out here. A couple things I'm going to do just before I really dig in. I'm going to cut off, I'm going to save this little piece over here. I'm going to use that shortly. Then I'm going to take this long slab that I've got, and I'm going to trim the edges so that I've got a nice rectangle to work from, saving any scraps that I have so that I can recycle them in the future. All right, so I've got this slab that I'm getting ready to work with. Before I do any more cutting, manipulating of this slab, I want to take a rib, and I'm going to use that rib to compress the clay. Rough texture. That's not the goal. The ultimate goal is to get all of the individual bits and pieces and clay molecules to line up as close as possible together, facing the same direction, so that as you are building with this, your finished product, it has more strength and resiliency than left uncompressed. And I'm going to do this on both sides. Okay, so I've got a nice compressed strip of clay here. And because, as I said, yes, I'm making specifically a very simple cup, but project speaking, I am using techniques from the darted slab cylinders. So very first step, the thing we need, we've got a slab, we need to make this a cylinder. So I've got a mold here that I'm going to use to help wrap and support this as I start to get it into that cylinder shape. I am also going to use the bevel cutter, this little red dude, the wire edges, and I'm going to bevel cut the end. Now here's the trick. I want my bevels to overlap so that I get a nice evenly distributed seam. So I have bevel cut on my right here. I'm now going to flip this piece upside down, and I'm going to bevel cut on the right over here. So at the very end, you'll have bevel on the front on one side and on the back on the other. Also, in preparation of making this into a cylinder, I am going to go ahead and score those bevels. I'm using a fork. I find it very efficient, and it just gives me a really good rough edge. So now I have my mold. And the purpose of the mold, we don't actually want to wrap it super tight. We just want it there enough to be supportive of our clay. So there's a number of ways that you can tack this. There's different size molds. If you are coming up against not really finding a mold that's quite the size you want, you can always take a mold that exists and wrap it with some additional layers of newspaper to help bulk it up, give you closer to the size that you want. But once again, I don't want to wrap this tight because I want this to be able to be removed quick and easy. So I'm going to very gently just stand up this slab and start to coax it around this form that I have. My mug's going to be more of a soup mug. I love soup and it's soup season, so here we go. Okay, so I've got my form in place just as a helpful reinforcement. I have scored, beveled, and now I need to add some slip into the seam before I join it together. And then I'm going to smooth this seam entirely. And because my form is really loose and also really large, I'm bracing it on the inside to give me a nice firm resistance as I'm smoothing the outside. And as always, we're going to smooth the inside as well. So I can take this form out of the way. I can brace the inside from the outside with my hands. And here we have a cylinder. Step 1, cylinder complete. This is where we start to add the darts, and the darts are going to start to change the shape of this a little bit to give us some nice rounded curves and a more gentle bottom to our mug rather than just a giant straight all the way to the edge. So when you're doing a darted slab cylinder, oftentimes it can be really helpful to cut out the darts that you need, the pattern for the darts that you want to use out of paper. I'm just going to kind of estimate here with the tools that I have around. So the first thing I like to do is kind of pre-mark where my darts are going to be. And because this form is so big, I'm going to give myself 4 darts around the base to help me control the curve. So I'm just going to mark top, bottom, left, right, like points on a compass. And this will help me line up where my darts are going to exist. I feel like my needle tool is not quite long enough. Oh, that's good length. I like the length of the tines of my fork, so I'm going to use that as a marker to tell how long I want the dart to be. So I'm just going to line up, okay, the top of the tine is here, and then the edge, this is where I want my dart to be. So I just went ahead and poked a hole. And I'm going to estimate I want the dart to be about as wide as my thumbnail on each side. So I'm just going to go ahead. One side and the other. So I now have 3 points. My left and right edge, as well as the very tip of my dart. And I can use straight edge or any number of tools to create that line and make that cut. So this is my first dart. And as I said, I want to use 4 of them, so I'm going to use this one as a stencil to cut on the other 3 sides. All right, so I've cut my darts. Now it's time to join these pieces back together. And as I do that, it's going to pull the top half here into an angle, which is going to create this nice gradual curve towards what will be the bottom of my cup. Before I super try to attach them, I'm going to rough up the inside corners, because we always have to slip and score. Add some slip into each. And then very gently, very gradually, I'm going to start to push all of these sides together so that they meet in those darts that I cut out. And we can start to see that curve forming. Now, as I'm doing the next step, which is fully joining those seams back together, you have the choice. You can always let your base be kind of squared off at this point, or through smoothing and blending and rounding, you can convince the clay to be a united round form. And I think today I'm going to go for full round. So obviously the very first priority is making sure that you get those seams joined. And I'm going to start to, you're going to get kind of pointy corners at the edge of that dart. And because I want this rounded, I'm going to start to really try to smooth those out. And so you'll notice I'm smoothing from the inside and the outside. I am focusing a little bit more on the outside at the moment just because of the angle of the dart. But I am going to go back and make sure that the inside is really smooth as well. So I've convinced it to be fairly rounded. Now I'm going to attach the base so that everything can be sealed and joined together, and I can flip it over. And at this point, you might have some waviness in the top. So I'm just going to take a needle tool and trim stuff down. So I'm trimming this down just a little bit so that it's mostly even. So now to add the bottom, that's what I saved this piece for. I'm not worried about being super precise at this particular moment because I still have to smooth. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to rough up all around the bottom edge here to prepare it. This is my piece that I'm using. Any places that I've got a lot of extra, I'll go ahead and trim it down just to make it a little bit more manageable. But I'm going to still let it be larger than it needs to be. Score around the edge down here. A little bit of slip all around the bottom. And I'm going to attach this piece. I'm going to focus on making sure it really, really sticks on the walls. And before I really worry about cleaning up and smoothing the bottom, I'm going to very carefully flip this over so that I can attack everything from the inside. The size got a little bit away from me. I think it's going to end up being a flower pot, but that's fine. My mother-in-law still needs more. So I'm smoothing all the way on the inside. Once that's really well attached, then I can flip it back over and trim and smooth. Actually, before I flip it, I'm gonna go ahead and, no, I lied. Flip it back over. And now I can make sure that it's super attached from the outside. I can trim as need be. Making sure to firmly attach all the way around. And there we go. We have a very generic, technically darted slab cylinder flower pot. Was a mug, but it was a mug that got a little too big, so now it's a flower pot. Obviously, you know, from here we've modified the shape of this. Now we can go in, add whatever decorations, textures, smoothing that we need to complete the rest of our design. The other thing that I would highly recommend in a lot of cylinder cases is coming back at the top around the end just to smooth and round those hard corners from the initial cuts. So at the moment, the top is still fairly square. So I usually just, you know, take a little bit of water on my thumb and forefinger and I go around the edge just to smooth the hard corners and round them down a bit. So from here, the next thing you're gonna see is still technically a darted slab cylinder. However, I'm gonna make some more advanced cuts, design decisions. I'm not gonna necessarily narrate the whole process. You'll see it on time lapse, but you will see very similar steps to what we did here, just advanced arrangement and types of darts.